I'm David Cott, host of New History of Spain, and this is episode 23, titled The Governorate of al-Andalus. In this episode, you will learn about the political history of the Umayyad Caliphate of Damascus and al-Andalus between 720 and 742, covering events like the Battle of Tours, the beginning of the Umayyad Caliphate's crisis with the Great Berber Revolt, and details about how many Arabs and Berbers settled in the Iberian Peninsula. Important concepts of al-Andalus. Before diving into the political history of this period, I think it's important to explain some terms and concepts related to al-Andalus. I will be using these terms frequently in future episodes, and I can keep explaining what they mean every time, so let's get started. Al-Andalus is a geographic term that refers to Spania, meaning the entire Iberian Peninsula, as confirmed by a bilingual coin from the year 716. However, as Christian powers advanced from the north, in historiography, Al-Andalus came to refer specifically to Muslim-controlled areas, and this is the definition I will use. The inhabitants of Al-Andalus were called Andalusis, not to be confused with Andalusians, as Al-Andalus covered a much larger area than modern-day Andalusia. Etymologically, there are various theories about the origin of the term Al-Andalus, but the most accepted ones suggest it's either a scholarly reference to the mythical Atlantis or derived from the Latinized Germanic word Landerus, meaning our land from the perspective of the gods. The term dhimmi refers to the people of the book, meaning Christians and Jews who were granted protected status under Islamic law. In exchange for respecting their faith and their own laws, dhimmis had to pay a special tax and face certain discriminations. However, as society became more Islamized, Muslim governors eventually had to introduce new taxes for Muslims as well. Mawlas were freedmen or slaves bound by client-patron relationships with Arab patrons. They were significant as the first non-Arab converts to Islam and played key roles during critical moments like the Abbasid Revolution that led to the downfall of the Umayyad Caliphate. Andalusi society can be divided along ethnic and religious lines. Ethnically, there were the Hispano-Goths, the bulk of the population, of Hispano-Roman and Gothic origin, most of whom converted to Islam over the centuries. The Berbers, or Amazighs, the indigenous peoples of North Africa, and the Arabs, originally from Arabia and Arab settlements around the Caliphate, who form a ruling minority. However, over time, these identities became blurred. It's important to note that someone could identify as Arab if they had even one distant Arab male ancestor. For example, the mothers of the heirs to the Umayyad dynasty were always Hispano-Gothic or Berber concubines, and yet they were still considered Arabs. This led Caliph Abd al-Rahman III to dye his beard black to appear more Arab. In terms of religion, there were Christians, Jews, and Muslims. When combining ethnicity and religion, we find groups like the Mozarabs, Hispano-Gothic Christians who lived under Muslim rule and remained the majority until the 10th century, and the Muwallats, Hispano-Goths or mixed individuals who embrace Islam. The Ummah refers to the Muslim community, while the Ulemas were scholars of Islamic theology and law. The Qadi was an Islamic judge who held significant prestige and importance in Islamic societies, while the Faqihs were experts in Islamic jurisprudence but did not serve as judges. The Maliki school is one of the four most important Sunni schools of Islamic jurisprudence. Founded by Malik ibn Anas in the 8th century, it emphasizes the legal traditions of Medina, is considered a conservative school of Islam, and was the dominant school in Al-Andalus throughout its history. The Emir or Sultan was the secular ruler of a Muslim territory, while the Caliph held a higher title, claiming to be the political and religious leader of the entire Muslim community. The Hajib was the chamberlain to the Emir or Caliph, often acting as the sovereign's right-hand man. Unlike in the East, in Al-Andalus, the Hajib was always a superior position to the Vizier, which could be translated as minister and was sometimes an honorary title without specific functions. The Kura was a territorial division in Al-Andalus equivalent to a province. The term fitna refers to periods of civil war among Muslims, carrying both political and religious connotations due to its association with schisms in the faith. In Islamic thought, the world was divided into three parts: The Dar al-Islam, or House of Islam, referring to territories ruled by Muslims, where non-Muslims could live as protected subjects if they submitted. The Dar al-Sul, or House of Treaty, referring to territories at peace with Muslims due to agreements. And the Dar al-Harb, or House of War, referring to non-Muslim territories without peace treaties, which could be targets for military expeditions to seize plunder, including goods, captives, and slaves. It's important to note that this division of the world is not found in the Quran or Hadiths. Instead, it was developed by an Islamic theologian and jurist in the 8th century. The final concept I want to discuss in this list is jihad. This polysemic word means both a moral effort to be a good Muslim and waging war against infidels in the Dar al-Harb, the Islamic equivalent of a holy war. The Governorate of al-Andalus in the 720s. The period of the Governorate of al-Andalus is relatively unknown and understudied for several reasons. A lack of sources, the peninsula's distance from Islamic political centers in the east, and historians' preference for focusing on periods of independence and splendor, especially the Caliphate of Córdoba. In episode 22, the Muslim conquest of the Iberian Peninsula, we discuss how the Arabs and Berbers conquered Iberia and measures taken by the first governors. After Musa and his son Abdelaziz failed to establish an independent or semi-autonomous kingdom in Al-Andalus and the Maghreb, Al-Andalus became a province of the Umayyad Caliphate of Damascus, dependent on the governor of Ifriqiya, modern-day Tunisia. From 740, with the Great Berber Revolt, Al-Andalus leaned toward self-governance, until the Umayyad Caliphate fell and the Umayyad prince Abd al-Rahman I arrived in the peninsula. Until then, the governors of Al-Andalus were Arab governors from outside the region. They governed in the caliph's name for a few months or years and then left. Their primary concerns were to pacify and establish effective control over the territory while increasing tax revenues, though it appears that few taxes from Al-Andalus reached Damascus once the initial war spoils ran out. The last governor I mentioned was Anbassa, who completed the conquest of Septimania by capturing Nimes and Carcassonne in 725. According to Arab sources, Anbassa doubled taxes on Christians, using his army and local auxiliaries to enforce them. This tax pressure may have triggered Pelagius' revolt in Asturias, which I will discuss along with the Battle of Covadonga in episode 25. Asturias and Cantabria were impoverished regions of little interest to Muslims, who instead focused on raids into wealthier Frankish territories. Anbassa and his successors launched risky incursions across the Pyrenees, such as a raid on Burgundy and the sack of Autun, deep in Frankish lands. Anbassa died in January 726, and between 726 and 732, 6 different governors ruled Al-Andalus. Little is known about most of them, though one was deposed in a coup and imprisoned by the governor of Ifriqiya. In 732, Abd al-Rahman ibn Abdallah al-Gafiqi, who had previously served as interim governor, was elected governor. He was respected for his fair treatment of both Arab and Berber troops, but is best known for his defeat at the Battle of Tours. Al-Gafiqi and the Battle of Tours. The Muslim defeat at Tours in 732 has been enshrined in the Christian popular imagination as the battle that saved Europe from Islam. This narrative is also applied to other events like the Second Arab Siege of Constantinople in 718, the Battle of Lepanto in 1571, and the Battle of Vienna in 1683. But that's not our focus today. In reality, the Umayyad Caliphate was overextended, lacking the manpower to occupy France or other parts of Europe. Duke Odo of Aquitaine had already inflicted a significant defeat on the Muslims at the Battle of Toulouse in 721. Interestingly, religious differences didn't stop Odo from allying with a rebellious Berber leader from the Pyrenees and even offering his daughter in marriage. This Berber, known as Munutha, remains a mysterious figure. It's unclear whether he was the same Munutha defeated by Pelagius at the Battle of Covadonga or a different individual altogether. What we do know is that this Berber rebelled in the Pyrenees, killed the Bishop of Urgell, and was ultimately defeated by Al-Gafiqi in Sardinia, in the central Catalan Pyrenees. After this, Al-Gafiqi advanced into Aquitaine through Pamplona, seeking plunder. He defeated Duke Odo, forcing him to seek help from his rival, Charles Martel, the de facto ruler of the Frankish kingdom. Odo had to accept Frankish sovereignty over Aquitaine, but this alliance enabled the combined forces of the Franks and the remnants of the Aquitanian army to halt the Muslim advance near Poitiers. The Muslims suffered heavy losses, including Al-Gafiqi himself. However, this defeat didn't mark the end of Muslim rule in parts of Gaul. The importance of the Battle of Tours, also known as the Battle of Poitiers, lies less in the Muslim defeat and more in Charles Martel's victory. It allowed him to end the independent rule of Duke Odo in Aquitaine, brought the Franks closer to the papacy, and paved the way for the rise of the Carolingian dynasty in France. Historian Huck Kennedy argues that, for Al-Andalus, the defeat marked the decline of a plunder-based economy. Without larger-scale campaigns, the Muslims lost a crucial outlet for internal tensions. Even so, significant raids continued for a time, and the decline of these expeditions had more to do with the broader crisis of the Umayyad Caliphate than with the Battle of Tours itself. The battle was a symptom, not the cause, of the end of Arab conquest as they had been conducted up to that point. After Al-Gafiqi's death, the governor of Ifriqiya appointed al-Malik ibn Qatan as his successor. Within a year of the Battle of Tours, Ibn Qatan resumed military expeditions in the Pyrenees and Gaul. However, his campaigns, including attacks on the Pyrenees and Vasconia, ended in failure with no significant achievements. Some historians, like García Moreno, suggest that references to battles in the Pyrenees, an imprecise term in antiquity that could include the Cantabrian Mountains, might align with the Battle of Covadonga, commonly dated to 718 or 722. However, García Moreno places this battle in 737, by which point Ibn Qatan was no longer governor of Al-Andalus. In any case, Ibn Qatan was deposed in 734 due to his poor military record and replaced by Uqba ibn al-Hajjaj. Uqba achieved initial successes, like capturing Avignon and Arles through agreements with the Christian authorities in Provence, who feared the Franks more than the Arabs. However, 3 years later, a combined Frankish and Lombard force expelled the Muslims. According to the Mozarabic Chronicle of 754, Uqba was fair in his tax policies and sent corrupt officials to face justice in Ifriqiya. Some Arab sources suggest that Pamplona briefly fell out of Umayyad control and may have been occupied by the Franks, but Uqba managed to restore Muslim rule there. It's also likely he led campaigns against Pelagius in Asturias and his son-in-law, Alfonso, in Cantabria. It wasn't until after the Berber Revolt and the chaos that led to the collapse of the Umayyad Caliphate that the Franks began to make significant gains in former Visigothic Septimania. Charles Martel conquered and destroyed the walls of Agde, Béziers, Maguelone, and Nimes. Historian Eduardo Manzano Moreno suggests that Charles Martel was not welcomed as a liberator. His actions appear to have been retaliatory, punishing the Visigothic bishops and aristocrats of Narbonensis for their collaboration with the Arabs. Charles Martel's son and successor, Pepin the Short, laid siege to Narbonne for years. The Visigoths ultimately betrayed and annihilated the Muslim garrison only after securing guarantees that their laws, codified in the Liber Judiciorum, would be respected. This betrayal ended Muslim rule in Septimania in 759. The Umayyad Caliphate of Hisham ibn al-Malik. Hisham ibn al-Malik was the last son of the renowned Caliph al-Malik to rule, governing for nearly 2 decades, from 724 to 743. His father and brother Al-Walid had set the course for their dynasty with their centralizing efforts, the promotion of Arabization and Islamization, and the construction of palaces and gardens that amazed the Christians of the time. It was during Caliph al-Malik's reign, around the year 700, that Islamic society began to take a distinctive shape. Before this, the division was mostly between conquerors and the conquered, and Islam had not yet been promoted as a state religion with the goal of spreading the faith among non-Arabs. During the Umayyad period, significant social changes occurred that also contributed to the eventual fall of the caliphate. As the Arabs settled and the pace of the conquest slowed, an Arab identity emerged in the late 8th century, distinguishing the conquering elite from the subjugated populations. Recent studies reveal that the Umayyad Caliphate experienced economic and urban growth, greater monetization of the economy, expanded irrigation systems, the rise of artisanal workshops, and decentralized fiscal policies that encourage local patronage in building infrastructure like canals and fortifications. Arab garrison towns grew into cities, attracting local populations either voluntarily or as slaves. Many of these slaves became mullahs, converting to Islam and learning Arabic to communicate with their patrons. This cultural exchange shaped new identities as both Arabs and non-Arabs influenced each other, much like Romanization in earlier times. The Umayyads also adopted practices from Roman and Persian models, such as granting different legal statuses based on religion, and using clothing and other outward markers to distinguish social and religious classes. Non-Muslims and even converted Berbers faced discriminatory policies, particularly in taxation. Initially, Arab conquerors were exempt from taxes, a privilege that attracted many non-Arabs to form client relationships with Arabs, or to enlist in the army in hopes of converting to Islam and avoiding taxes. However, even though non-Arab converts were relatively few, their inclusion created financial strains for the Umayyad treasury. It is said that only the devout Caliph Umar II ordered equal treatment for new converts, but subsequent caliphs and local authorities ignored this precedent due to the growing need for revenue to support the military and urban projects. Given the Arabs' numerical inferiority, they eventually had to choose between increasing repression or reducing the privileges of being Muslim. They opted for the latter, but the reforms introduced during the Umayyad period were insufficient, which contributed to the success of the Abbasid revolution. Among the fiscal reforms, lifelong pensions for soldiers' descendants were abolished. Zakat, alms for the poor and one of the 5 pillars of Islam, became a mandatory tax for Muslims. And a land tax was introduced for Muslims as well. Under the Umayyad Caliphate of Damascus, the classic theoretical framework for Islamic taxation had not yet emerged. Instead, multiple taxation systems were in place, often reflecting the pre-conquest fiscal systems of each region. Despite this, there were attempts to standardize taxation across the empire. Over time, tax collection became more sophisticated, increasing revenues but also causing resentment and unrest among the population, leading to several uprisings. As the population became more Islamized, it became necessary to reduce fiscal disparities between Muslims and non-Muslims. However, it remains widely accepted that during the Umayyad Caliphate and beyond, the average Muslim paid fewer taxes than dhimmis, Christians and Jews, under their rule. During Hisham ibn al-Malik's reign, the Caliphate began showing signs of territorial overextension, as evidenced by a series of military setbacks. In addition to the failed siege of Constantinople during his brother Sulaiman's reign, the Caliphate suffered defeats against the Franks, the Khazars in the Caucasus, the Turks in Central Asia, and the Indians in the Sindh region of present-day Pakistan. These defeats were only the beginning of greater challenges. The Berber Revolt, the Shia uprising led by a great-grandson of Caliph Ali, and the Byzantine victory at the Battle of Akroinon, all in 740, marked a turning point. Increased taxation and these military losses made the Umayyad dynasty increasingly unpopular among the diverse populations they ruled, who viewed them as unjust and irreligious leaders. The Great Berber Revolt and the arrival of the Syrians. In 739 or 740, the Great Berber Revolt erupted in North Africa, driven largely by dissatisfaction with the lack of new conquests and the discrimination Berbers faced under the Arab elite. Why would they continue to accept the rule of a foreign elite that treated them as second-class citizens when there was no prospect of plunder or territorial expansion? Berbers resented their exclusion from the spoils of war, their inability to access high-ranking positions, the enslavement of Berber women as concubines for Arabs, and being subjected to attacks initially meant only for dhimmi, despite many Berbers having at least nominally converted to Islam. Naturally, the Berbers demanded the equal treatment that God's message in the Quran preached. This gave rise to the popularity of the Harahite branch of Islam among North Africans, which advocated for the caliphate to be led by the most virtuous Muslim, regardless of ethnicity or lineage. As a result, the Caliphate lost control of the Western Maghreb in a carefully coordinated rebellion among various tribes. The revolt began after the governor of Ifriqiya had dispatched an Arab expedition to Byzantine Sicily. He hastily recalled the expeditionary force and, in the meantime, sent an Arab army from Kairouan, with a reserve force stationed in Tlemcen, Algeria. Near Tangier, in Morocco, the Arabs suffered a devastating defeat at the Battle of the Nobles, where many prominent Arab leaders perished. The Tlemcen army panicked and, in an ill-advised move, massacred Berber civilians, hardly a way to calm the rebels' anger. By the time the Sicilian expedition returned, it was too late. Tlemcen had fallen. The governor of Ifriqiya had no choice but to request reinforcements directly from Syria. The rebellion also spread to al-Andalus, destabilizing the province and further undermining Umayyad control in this peripheral part of the empire. The Umayyad Caliphate had already lost control over the Cantabrian Mountains, and the Berber Revolt marked the permanent end of Muslim dominance in Cilicia, the northwestern part of the Iberian Peninsula, including the Douro River basin. This area fell under the control of local elites and Berbers, as well as free and self-governed peasant communities. The nascent Asturian monarchy under Alfonso I took advantage of this turmoil to expand its territory and raid Galicia and the northern half of the Meseta, or Central Plateau. Caliph Hisham ibn al-Malik sent an army of over 30,000 Arab Syrian soldiers, supplemented by troops from Ifriqiya, to reclaim control of the Maghreb. However, they suffered a crushing defeat at the Battle of Bagdoura near Fez. The remnants of the Syrian army, about 10,000 strong and led by Balkh ibn Bishr, sought refuge in Ceuta. Besieged by the rebels and desperate for food, they appealed to the governor of al-Andalus, Ibn Qatan, who was serving his second term after deposing Uqba ibn al-Hajjaj. Initially, Ibn Qatan refused and even punished those who sent supplies to Ceuta. However, he eventually relented, recognizing he lacked sufficient forces to quell the Berber uprising in the peninsula. The arrival of Balkh's Syrian contingents significantly impacted the political landscape of the Governorate of al-Andalus. They introduced political factionalism between the Qais and Yaman, which I will discuss in detail in 3 episodes. Culturally, their presence also increased the Arab influence in the region. With the Syrian troops' arrival, the Arabs had no trouble crushing the Berber Revolt in al-Andalus. But that success brought its own challenges. Balkh ibn Bishr had promised to return to North Africa after completing the campaign. However, why would the Syrian Arabs go back to the Maghreb, where land was poorer and their lives might be at risk? Even returning to Syria held little appeal, as it likely meant being sent to other distant and dangerous fronts. Upon arriving in al-Andalus, these Syrian soldiers realized they could establish themselves as the dominant military force in the westernmost part of the Islamic world and improve their personal fortunes. Balkh ultimately betrayed and crucified Ibn Qatan, highlighting how brutal the factional struggles between Qais and Yaman had become. Balkh defeated the Baladiun forces, meaning the original Arab conquerors of al-Andalus and their descendants, near Cordoba, though he succumbed to his wounds the next day. His lieutenant succeeded him as governor. The Syrian troops extended their control from Cordoba to Merida, but did not fully dominate al-Andalus, which amidst the disorder was effectively governed by local elites and militias. Meanwhile, in the Maghreb, the situation remained critical as the Arabs suffered several major defeats. Recognizing the severity of the crisis, Caliph Hisham appointed his best general to govern Ifriqiya and suppress the uprising. The Great Berber Revolt is considered to have ended when the rebels failed to capture Kairouan in 742. However, its significance cannot be overstated, as it permanently fragmented the Islamic world politically. In present-day Morocco and Algeria, local or Eastern origin dynasties emerged, and neither the Umayyads nor their Abbasid successors managed to reconquer these territories. The Arab and Berber Colonization of al-Andalus. The information we have about where Arabs and Berbers settled and how many emigrated to al-Andalus is limited. As mentioned in the previous episode, the conquerors of the Visigothic kingdom were accused of keeping the state's share of the spoils and not paying the required tributes from their conquests. Musa ibn Nusayr distributed lands, granting Muslims ownership of properties from former fiscal lands, those left behind by fugitives, those Christians killed in battle, and those who resisted the conquest. Additionally, they could acquire large estates owned by Hispano-Gothic magnates through marriage with native women. Unlike other parts of the Arab Empire, in Al-Andalus, Arabs and Berbers did not confine themselves to garrison cities, but instead settled throughout the territory as landowners. Traditionally, it was believed that Arabs settled more in cities and were given the most fertile lands, primarily around the Guadalquivir and Ebro rivers, while Berbers were relegated to arid and mountainous areas. This difference in settlement was often attributed to the discrimination Berbers faced, but some historians argue that they simply chose lands similar to their previous lifestyles, favoring areas suited for grazing. However, Pedro Chalmeta and Pierre Guichard proposed that Arabs and Berbers settled in territories as they conquered them. For example, Berbers were more concentrated along the route Tariq took, via Gibraltar, Córdoba, and Toledo. Berbers were notably present in the mountains of western Andalusia, around Toledo and Guadalajara, Extremadura, Valencia, and in areas like modern-day Portugal and the Douro Basin. However, they were also scattered in smaller numbers across the peninsula, in regions like Catalonia or Navarre. Arabs, on the other hand, were concentrated in the lower Guadalquivir, the Ebro Valley, Toledo, Mérida, Murcia, and along the Andalusian coast, essentially following the paths taken by Musa and Abdelaziz. I have mentioned the initial conquerors and their descendants, known as the Baladiyun. But later migrations of Arabs and Berbers also occurred, making it difficult to estimate their population accurately. For instance, during periods of drought or the Berber Revolt, Al-Andalus lost some of its Amazigh population, only for Syrian Arabs to arrive later. At the end of the Caliphate of Córdoba or during the Almoravid and Almohad periods, new large waves of Berbers came to Al-Andalus. These migrations don't include the Arabs and Berbers who may have moved in and out during more peaceful times. Estimates of the Arab and Berber population during the conquest and immediately afterward vary widely, ranging from fewer than 50,000 to around 200,000. The academic consensus is that more Berbers than Arabs arrived. According to historian Ahmed Tahiri, many of these Berbers belong to the Nafza tribe from the Rif region. It's no coincidence that Abderrahman I's mother was from this tribe, which helped him gain their support to consolidate control over Al-Andalus. Traditionally, the scale of Arab and Berber migration has been downplayed to support the nationalistic idea that a Muslim Spain emerged where the Spanish cultural element survived. Over time, however, Al-Andalus became an Islamic country with an Arab cultural identity. It's not uncommon for a small number of settlers to profoundly reshape the culture and society of the conquered, as happened with Romanization in Hispania or Hispanization in the Americas. For this reason, I will estimate the number of Arabs and Berbers who arrived to be above 100,000 and likely closer to 200,000, more than double the Visigoths who settled in Hispania. By comparison, the indigenous population of the Iberian Peninsula is thought to have been between 4 and 5 million, reduced by epidemics and famines at the end of the Visigothic kingdom. The verdict. Today's verdict delves into why the concept of Muslim Spain emerged in nationalist historiography during the 19th and 20th centuries. National Catholic narratives outright rejected the Muslim past, refusing to accept it as part of their history. However, as a school of Spanish Arabists emerged during the era of nation-building, the idea of Muslim Spain became an integrative paradigm to incorporate this period into Spain's history. Muslim Spain challenged the inseparable association between Spanish identity and Catholicism. It rejected the blanket characterization of all Andalusis as Arabs or Moors, valued the previously denigrated Muslim contributions to arts and sciences, and emphasized the resilience of Roman and Visigothic traditions within Al-Andalus by Hispanicizing the Arabs by making them Spanish. Then came historian Pierre Guichard, founder of the modern Andalusia studies, who dismissed the notion of Muslim Spain, arguing instead for the concept of Al-Andalus, a civilization fundamentally distinct from Roman and Visigothic periods. According to Hisham, al-Andalus was an Islamic state with an Arab cultural identity, making terms like Hispano-Arabs misleading, as they implied a predominant Hispanic cultural and national element over foreign influences. Historiographical concepts like Muslim Spain or the Reconquista, as we will see in the next episode, are examples of how history is politically shaped and interpreted through the lens of present-day society. That's why studying historiographical evolution, contextualizing past interpretations, and revising them when they are inadequate is so important. And with that, the verdict ends. Before you go, I want to encourage you to hit the like button and comment on something that surprised you if you are watching this episode on YouTube. And remember to subscribe for more free content on the history of Spain. You can join the Discord, follow the show on Blue Sky, or hit the notification bell on YouTube if you don't want to miss any new content. You can also join my Patreon or the paid Apple Podcast subscription to enjoy exclusive benefits like early access to all my content. Links to everything are in the description. In the next episode, we will tackle a highly controversial topic that has been interpreted in various ways for ideological reasons: the Reconquista. Thank you for your attention and see you soon!